Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor review to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, a couple pieces of news involving the Canucks and Flyers' new head coaches, and some other coaching updates from around the NHL. Plus, we also got some trade rumors involving the Ducks, the Flames, the Red Wings, and a couple of other teams. We'll go to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do it without you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. It really does support the channel, and we're on the road to 500 subscribers. And don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section below listing all that discussed in today's video. So in today's video, we've got a couple of things to talk about. We're going to start off, as we usually do, by talking about all the signings from our past couple of days. There were 11 signings over those last few weeks in April and the first week of May that we're going to touch on here today that we never did over the past couple of trade rumor videos. So back over, we saw 4 ELCs be signed over this time frame, and 7 extensions also happened. So we'll touch on all of the signings from the past couple of days. So first, the San Jose Sharks gave a 3-year ELC with a $940,000 AAV to left-shot defensive prospect Leo Wallenius, who was the second-round pick, 53rd overall, back in the 2024 draft. Wallenius had a really good season over in the SHL. Looks like a very fantastic defensive prospect there for the Sharks. I think eventually he will be a very solid addition there for the San Jose Sharks. So interesting note there, but the Sharks have signed one of their top-end D prospects in Wallenius to a 3-year ELC. Then we saw the Minnesota Wild sign left winger, who's a 21-year-old. He was an undrafted player, Riley Mercer, to a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $820,000. They'll be in the start of next year. Mercer looks like a very fantastic left-wing prospect. I think eventually might be able to be a bottom 6 guy for the Wild. So interesting note there, but Mercer has signed a 3-year ELC with the Minnesota Wild. Then we saw Utah Mammoth sign one of their players to an ELC, and that was Mikkel Kunk. Kunk, who is an undrafted player, gets a 1-year deal with a AAV of $861,000. Looks like a very fantastic center prospect. I think eventually could be a decent bottom 6 addition there for the Utah Mammoth. So very interesting out there, but those are some very interesting ELCs from the past couple of days. And then we saw a handful of extensions be given out. So we'll touch on the shorter term, smaller AAV deals first. The Colorado Avalanche have given a 1-year extension to Zakhar Bardakov, who was $868,000 on a 1-year deal. He's a center player. He was a 2021 7th-round pick of the New Jersey Devils. Hasn't played at the NHL level at this point in time. Had his right to expire with New Jersey, so he signs a new 1-year deal in Colorado. Bardakov, I think, could eventually be a decent bottom 6 maybe guy, maybe a call-up option guy for the Avalanche. Interesting note there, but they have signed him to a 1-year deal. The Washington Capitals have signed Borgon Triniev to a 1-year extension with AAV of league minimum, so $775,000. Triniev played the entirety of this year at the AHL level. Triniev is a decent left winger. He just finished up his ELC, so I think eventually Triniev could be a very fantastic pickup there for the Caps. So interesting note there, but they have signed Triniev to a new deal. The Pittsburgh Penguins have signed Philip Hollander to a 2-year contract extension with the AAV of league minimum, $775,000. Hollander's been a really good defensive prospect over the past couple of years. I think he had a small stint in Toronto, then went back to Pittsburgh. He's been a really good AHL player. Hasn't got much opportunity at the NHL level, but I still think it could be a decent bottom 6 forward there for the Penguins. So interesting note there, but Hollander's gone a 2-year extension with Pittsburgh. The Utah Mammoth have extended Jackson Stauber. Stauber was the team's 3rd stringer this year. Got into a couple of games of NHL action due to the injuries to Connor Ingram. Stauber signs a 2-year extension with AV of league minimum. I think Stauber long term could be a decent 3rd stringer or a 4th stringer. So I think signing him to a 2-year deal to give some more goalie depth would be a smart move there for Utah. Then we saw the Edmonton Oilers sign one of their underrated defensemen from this past year, and that's D Emberson. Emberson, who was acquired, I'm pretty sure, in the Cody Ceci deal back just before the season started, signs a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of $1.3 million. That's a really good sign there for the Oilers. At $1.3 million, it's not an overly bad contract there for the Oilers. Emberson's worked out beautifully as a 3rd pair left shot defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers this year. So far, had 2 goals and 13 points in 76 games with the Edmonton Oilers. Oilers this year. So very good stats numbers there for Emberson, and I think he should continue to grow into a solid third, maybe even second pair of defensemen. So a solid 2-year extension there for the Oilers as they sign Emberson. The Nashville Predators have also given a contract extension, 1-year league minimum, to Andreas Englund. Englund, who had a goal and 3 points in 35 games with the Kings and Predators combined this year, looks like a very decent 6'7" defenseman. Wouldn't be surprised if he was like an AHL player, because we'll see him be called up. So very interesting sign there from the Nashville Predators as they've extended Englund, and he will not be hitting the UFA market. And then we saw 2 massive contract extensions with 2 of the top UFAs for this upcoming season that are no longer UFAs. First in Winnipeg, we talked about in our last video, trade rumor video, about how Alex Iafallo was extended by the Jets. Well, after that, they gave another big contract extension as Neil Pionk was entering the final year of his 4-year contract, signed a 6-year extension with an AAV of $7 million. So Pionk goes from being a $5.875 million AAV defenseman to a $7 million defenseman. So it's a little bit of a pay bump. This past year had 10 goals and 39 points in 69 games with Winnipeg. It's starting to round out into a really good defenseman. Was fantastic in Game 7 of that Winnipeg-St. Louis first-round series. So Pionk's still doing really good. He's turned to a very fantastic number 2 defenseman. I think the Jets are quite alright about how that Jacob Trouba deal's turned out with how well Pionk has been on that Jets team. And they've awarded him with a 6-year contract extension. So very interesting sign there. But the Jets have given Neil Pionk a massive long-term extension to keep him in the fold with the Winnipeg Jets. And then we saw the Carolina Hurricanes sign one of their in-season acquisitions to a new extension, and that was Taylor Hall. As Hall, who was in the final year of his 4-year contract, signed a 3-year contract extension with the Carolina Hurricanes with an AAV of $3.16 million. Hall this past year had 18 goals and 42 points in 77 games with the Hawks and the Hurricanes combined. Was a very fantastic middle six forward for both Chicago and Carolina, and has worked quite well for the Carolina Hurricanes en route to being very close to ending their second round series against Washington. So very interesting stuff there. But the Canes have liked Hall enough. I think at $3.16 million, that's not overly bad for what Hall brings. It's just about half of what he was making on his current contract. So very interesting stuff there. Those are all signs we talked about from our past couple of days. A couple of ELCs, including one from Wallenius. We also saw a couple of interesting signings, like low-end signings, guys like Trinia, Stalber, Hollander, and then 2 massive ones as Pionk in Winnipeg and Hall in Carolina have both been taken off the free agent market and are going to remain with their current team. So interesting note there. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. So first, in Toronto, Anthony Stolarz, who has been skating for the Leafs, is still out with the upper body injury, but at least he started to skate. It still sounds like he'll be out for at least a couple of days with his upper body injury, so it sounds like he probably won't be back for the rest of the series against Florida. Might be back if the Leafs are able to make it to the Eastern Conference Final, but he's not going to be back, it sounds like, for the second round, so interesting note there. Evan Rodrigues missed Game 5 of the Leafs-Panthers series with an undisclosed injury and is out day-to-day, so it's a babble there for the Panthers. Rodrigues is a very fantastic top 6 forward, so seeing him be out for any length of period of time is going to be bad. Miro Heiskanen, who has missed the last 4 months with a knee injury, was active for long-term injury reserve and returned to game action in Game 4 of the Stars-Jets series. That was a massive boost for the Dallas Stars to get their top defenseman and Miro Heiskanen back into the fold, so really good stuff there for Dallas. Logan Stanley, who had been out since Game 6 of the first round with an undisclosed injury, was a healthy scratch for Game 4, so Stanley is now officially healthy, but he won't be back in the game action for the Jets. Mattias Ekholm is now only out day-to-day and may be back at some point during the Western Conference Final. It sounds like he will miss the first 2 games of the Western Conference Final for the Edmonton Oilers, but he will be back at some point later on in the series, so very good boost there for the Oilers. Mark Stone missed Game 5 due to upper body injury and is out day-to-day, so the Knights were eliminating Game 5, so it doesn't really mean anything. He should be ready for training camp next year, but that was a bad blow there for the Knights to not have their captain in their final game of the 2025 season. So very interesting stuff there from our past couple of days. Good to see guys like Heiskanen and Stanley get back in the game action. Hopefully they don't look too bad in their returns, but bad to see guys like Rodrigues, Stolarz, and Stone all be out with injuries still, and hopefully they don't be out for an overly long period of time, but some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of pieces of news. Now we've got a couple of things to talk about when it comes to the coaching updates. According to a couple of recent reports I've seen, DJ Smith, former head coach in Ottawa and assistant coach in Los Angeles, is apparently interviewing for coaching jobs amongst a couple of teams, but I have seen him be linked especially to the Pittsburgh Penguins. That'll be an interesting pickup there for the Penguins if DJ Smith was the team's new head coach, and it does sound like he's having other options out there. So I think there's now 4 still coaching availability, so we'll have to wait and see if DJ Smith does wind up being a head coach at some point in the next couple of days or weeks. But interesting out there is it does sound like DJ Smith is trying to get a new coaching opportunity. Same thing with Jay Woodcroft, as the former Oilers head coach, is amongst some head coaching candidates for the Boston Bruins. So we know the Bruins are definitely going to be looking for a new coach. Maybe it's still Joe Sacco, who is the interim head coach, but it does sound like they're still going through their coaching process. And it does seem like Jay Woodcroft might be one of the candidates. So having that former Oilers head coach as new bench boss in Boston might be a smart move there for the Bruins. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But Woodcroft and Smith are both taking interviews, and it seems like Smith in Pittsburgh and Woodcroft in Boston are amongst some of the finalists in those 2 options, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Going over to the other 2 coaching updates, and that is with new head coaches, as the Canucks and the Flyers have officially gotten their 2 new head coaches. With Vancouver, they have now officially announced that former, I think, defensive coach or assistant coach in their system, Adam Foote, has been promoted to the head coaching position for the Vancouver Canucks. That's a really good boost there for Foote, the former player. I think he's played a whole bunch at the NHL level. He wound up going into the coaching staff for the Canucks, a guy who Quinn Hughes was very fond of. So to make maybe Quinn Hughes happy, they promote him to the head coaching option. He's a new head coach. He hasn't had any head coaching experience anywhere else, so it's going to be a very new experience for Foote. But I think this is the right move there for the Canucks. Foote's already been involved with the Vancouver Canucks over the past couple of years as a lower end coach, so now making him the head coach is very interesting. Apparently him and Manny Malhotra were the final 2 that the Canucks were looking at, but they do make Adam Foote the new head coach, and for the first time in his career, Adam Foote will be a head coach of an NHL organization, so interesting note there. Well, old Canucks head coach, who they let go in the offseason, and that's Rick Tochett, has found his new home as he is heading to the Philadelphia Flyers. Tochett has signed a new contract to be the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers organization. Not too much anyone's surprise. There was a ton of speculation that Tochett was going to be going to the Philadelphia Flyers organization to be their new head coach. I think it was like a 5-year contract he signed in Philadelphia, so he's going to be there for a while. So that's a pretty good pickup there. I think Tochett's a pretty good head coach, has experience like we just talked about in Vancouver. He was also head coach in Arizona. I think he was an assistant coach in Pittsburgh when they won their cups. So Tochett's been around the NHL and has had plenty of head coaching opportunities, and he's now going to Philadelphia, so very interesting out there. But Tochett's now a new head coach in Philadelphia, and Foote is a new head coach in Vancouver, and we'll have to see if these are the right moves for these 2 teams. But those are all the coaching updates from the past couple of days. Going over to the Buffalo Sabres, Lou Lamerillo was recently seen getting off of a plane in Buffalo, and although there's no actual connections, it does seem like Buffalo may have some interest in bringing Lou Lamerillo in some sort of a role in their front office. I'm not sure if it'll be to replace Kevin Adams. I highly doubt that, but maybe like an advisory role, president of hockey ops, something like that. It doesn't seem like the Sabres will be opposed to doing that. It does seem like they want to try and bring in someone who has some veteran experience in the front office, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But it does seem like Lamerillo could be brought in by the Buffalo Sabres. According to a couple of recent reports I've seen from Puckpedia and a couple of other sources, it seems like the Ottawa Senators are keeping their first round pick for this year. Remember, as of the Evgeny Dodonov situation, they had to forfeit either the 2024, 2025, or 2026 first round pick. So they kept their pick last year, they kept their pick this year, so it seems that they will have to forfeit next year's, and they are hoping that maybe the NHL could rescind that pick to maybe like a lower end pick, or maybe rescind it entirely. So it does seem like Ottawa is going to be keeping their 2025 first round pick, and then maybe move off their 2026 first round pick, which would be forfeited, or the NHL could rescind it, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to New York Islanders, I keep on seeing this report come up from a couple of people, and that is that if the Maple Leafs do not bring back Brendan Shanahan, which if they do lose their first round series, a lot of people think is going to be a very likely option, then a lot of people think that the Islanders should hire Brandon Shanahan in some option, whether that be a president of hockey ops or as their new GM. We'll have to wait and see, but I keep on seeing Brendan Shanahan's name be linked to New York Islanders organization after probably Lamerillo, who was a former Leafs GM as well, went to Long Island. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Brendan Shanahan, because if he's not brought back by the Toronto Maple Leafs, then there's a possibility he could go to the New York Islanders organization. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but those are all some updates from our past couple days. Keep your eye on DJ Smith and Jay Woodcroft as potential finalists for the head coaching positions for the last 4 teams. Well, Foote and Tocchett are new head coaches in Vancouver and Philly respectively. Lamerillo could join Buffalo in some sort of a role in their front office. Ottawa's going to keep their 2025 first round pick, and the Islanders could go after Brendan Shanahan if he does wind up walking away from Toronto. So I have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So lastly here, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we're going to start out with the New Jersey Devils. I saw an article recently talking about how the Devils could maybe in either this offseason or next year's offseason, maybe more likely next year's offseason, but they could look to try and buy out Ondrej Palat. Now, Palat was a number of years back signed, I think it was a 6-year contract with the AV of $5 million to be with the New Jersey Devils and their team. I think they're 4 years into that contract, so I think he's got this upcoming season plus the year after, so I think he's got 2 years left on his contract at a $5 million cap hit. But Palat has not produced overly well this past couple of years, especially this year. I think he only had like 10 or 15 goals, and he only had like 35 or 40 points. Like, he wasn't the productive player that the Devils signed him to be. So this article mentioned that the Devils could try and consider a Palat buyout. Now, they say it's more likely next year because he'll only have 1 year left on his deal, and it's going to be a lot easier to buy out that contract with only 1 year left than 2 years, and it will be easier because it wouldn't be as long a term of a buyout. But I could also see it happen this year. Like, we know the Devils are definitely going to be going through some changes this year after being eliminated in round 1 by Carolina, and with Palat not looking overly good, I wouldn't be surprised if the Devils also considered a trade for him. Like, they could maybe retain $1 to $1.5 million, bump his AAV down to like $3.5-4 million. Maybe that would make some sense for the New Jersey Devils to consider a buyout. So we're going to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on New Jersey. Like we said, I'm sure there's very likely chance they're going to have some major changes in this year in the offseason, and maybe Palat could be one of them. So keep your eye on Ondrej Palat. Going over to the Calgary Flames, I saw a couple of recent reports from Flames media saying that they could go big game hunting in free agency this year. Now, we know that the Flames just missed out on the playoffs. They were tied in points with the St. Louis Blues for the last playoff spot in the Western Conference, but they missed because of tie-breaking procedures. So they were ever so close to the playoffs. And while I do think they need to take a step back, maybe regress a little bit more, and try and get maybe a better draft pick next year, like next year's the McKinnon draft, I think they should definitely be going for him. There's some people out there, especially from Flames media, who said they could go big game hunting in free agency this year. They have a whole bunch of cap space. They're one of the teams who has the most cap space in the NHL. They could go and do a lot of different things, and if they do feel that they are that close to making the playoffs again for next year, then maybe it makes sense for them to go after a couple of interesting options. Like, there's a couple of really big pieces in free agency. You could go after bringing back Bennett. We talked about that. They could go after Marner, Besser, Ehlers. Like, those are all some really big options. Brock Nelson, John Tavares. Like, there's a whole bunch of really good UFAs out there, especially on the forward group this year, who could be had for the right price. Now, I don't think the Flames should do this. I think they should go out and sign some free agents, but not any big spending. And I think they should try and maybe take another step back next year to maybe try and continue on with this rebuild. But if they feel that they just need a quick retool and they can go out, get some more players, then maybe that's the route that they go through. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the Calgary Flames. Very likely chance that they will go out and try to sign some UFAs in this year's offseason, so keep your eye on that. Next, going over to the Buffalo Sabres. According to a couple of recent reports we've seen, including from David Pagnotta, he mentions do not be surprised if Bowen Byram is on the trade block this year. Now, Byram is in the final year of his deal. He's going to be an RFA on July 1st. He's going to after a really good season. I think he had like, what, 8-9 goals and was up around the 40-point plateau. Like, he had a really good season in Buffalo this year. But with the Sabres already paying Power $8 million and Dahlin $11.5 million, they don't really have enough money to pay yet another player $7+ million. And Byram's going to command between the $7 to $8 million range. So with that in mind, a lot of people I've seen say that do not be surprised if Bowen Byram is dealt this year in the offseason after he was acquired last year at the trade deadline from Colorado. So keep your eye on Bowen Byram. Like, I think it will take a really high asking price to part with Byram. I won't be surprised if they try to do some sort of player-for-player swap like they did with Milstead back over last year's trade deadline. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to do something similar with maybe a younger player who can help them on the forward group. Also wouldn't be surprised if they maybe try to acquire like a first-round pick and really good prospect in a sort of a deal for Byram. So it's going to take a high asking price to pry Byram out of Buffalo, but it definitely seems like Byram is going to be had at some point in the offseason for new teams. So any team is looking for a top 4 defenseman who can play left side or the right side and could really help strengthen a team's top 4, look for them to try and target Bowen Byram. And lastly, going over to the Detroit Red Wings, I've seen a couple of recent people, including from Max Boltman of The Athletic, saying that the Detroit Red Wings are a potential option for Sam Bennett in free agency. Now, Bennett, like we talked about, he's still in the playoffs. He's still trying to help the Panthers get to the Eastern Conference Final, maybe back to their 3rd consecutive Stanley Cup Final. So he's still focused on that. But Bennett's going to be a premium UFA in this year's free agent market. Like, he's a really solid center. He can play second line minutes. He's not afraid to lay the bodies. He's a very physical type guy, but can also put up a really good point total. Like, he can put up between 15 and 20 goals and like 40 to 45, maybe even 50 points. So he's a guy who can be a second line center, produce some physicality, and also put you up a whole bunch of points. So he's a very good package type player. We've heard about him potentially going back to Calgary. We've heard about him going and re-signing in Florida, and maybe Detroit's another option. We know that the Detroit Red Wings could definitely use another top 6 guy, and really could definitely use a second line center. And Bennett would be that for the Detroit Red Wings. And I think he could work well with a guy like maybe DeBrincat or Raymond on that team's second line. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. No guarantees by any means that Bennett is going to head to Detroit, or even if Bennett is going to leave Florida in free agency. But if he does hit free agency, expect Detroit to be one of the main teams interested in trying to acquire Sam Bennett's services. So definitely, that's all I'm talking for today. That's all the trade rumors. I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on all that discussed here today down in the comment section below. Do you see Bennett going to Detroit? Do you think the Devils will buy out Palat? Is there a Byram trade in the works for Buffalo? And could we see Calgary go big game hunting in this year's free agent market? Definitely have to get thoughts on all of that, plus all of the coaching updates, the Lamerillo, the 2025 first round pick for Ottawa, and the Shanahan updates, and the injuries and the signings from our past couple of days. Definitely have thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you'd like to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're so close to 500 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below. I also blog, talk about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I've linked it in the description below. Kind of see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.